Money doesn't just come from one place. It drips, trickles, flows, and floods into our lives in different ways. Welcome to Drip, Trickle, Flow, Flood, a podcast that explores the power of multiple income streams. We've got merch. That's right. Drip, Trickle, Flow, Flood t-shirts are officially here, and they're as comfy as they are conversation starting. Grab yours at the link in our show notes. Hey, Tony, how you doing today?
Hey, how are you, Melissa? What have you been up to?
Oh, what have I been up to? Just hanging, dancing,
That's That's
working.
perfect.
Yeah, all kinds of fun. Going to the gym. Not much. Enjoying that our weather is getting a little warmer. So that's been good. How about you?
Yeah, I've been good. I got back from a trip to Maui, which was awesome. I paddleboarded my little heart out. So that was sweet
Fun.
whales and turtles and all those things. So that was fantastic. I like getting out of the Pacific Northwest to get some sunshine this time of year. I don't mind the gray skies and some rain and stuff. I still go outside, but and I need that influx of vitamin D.
I mean, vitamin D is definitely good. It's definitely good. I like my gloom, so I cannot.
Yeah, I know you like your gloom. You
Not
get
really.
to hunker down and probably are really productive this time of year.
Yeah.
Get it?
But that sounds fun. I'm glad that you had a good time in Maui. We have a good article today to share with everyone in this episode. Just Tony and I are going to be chatting with guests today. And the article, which we will link in our show notes, is on how median salaries are shifting in the United States. So definitely a hot topic right now. I would say at the top of the article, it talks about how median incomes went up pretty much everywhere in 2024, but the size of the increases obviously varies by state. And obviously, that doesn't always mean much when expenses are through the roof, grocery prices, etc. So I guess it is meeting the moment at least.
Yeah, it is a good sign that incomes are going up because incomes had been fairly stagnant. And I know that has been a goal of, I don't know, let's just call it the powers that be for the last few years, is to get household incomes up, as we've been dealing with pretty sizable inflation coming out of COVID, and then that has leveled off a little bit. And so hopefully with the leveling off of inflation, or getting the inflation down to the 2 to 3% range, and then if income's going up, that's good. And yeah, so at this top of the article, this is on the Visual Capital website. So they have a great visual of what were the salaries in 2023, what are they in 24, and there's all these lines, right? And whether the state went up or down in the ranking from 2023 to 24. So it is pretty interesting to see. A lot of them did stay the same, but there were some very significant jumps. And before we started recording, Melissa, you made the comment of maybe some remote work is having an impact on the incomes in these states.
Yes. And certainly having an impact in our area. Maybe not the entire state, but it's certainly having an impact in the area of Washington where Tony and I live. There are a lot of remote workers here. Many have jobs in Seattle, so it's like heavy tech industry, but other industries as well. And the housing prices are sky high here. And we have, as I'm sure you do too, Tony, we have a bunch of friends in real estate who are real estate agents, and it's every buyer that they get is either just a remote worker who makes a giant salary from Seattle or another big city, or somebody who's inherited a big nut from generational wealth. So it's very interesting because we don't really have locally an economy to support that, right? There aren't really many jobs in our area to support how the cost of living here.
So it's interesting because you're speaking very regionally. So Washington is 8 on the list for income. So that's pretty high up on the list. But Seattle, Bellevue, some areas like that could absolutely be skewing our numbers, right? So you get outside of that circle, what happens? So that is a curious way to think about this, right? If you look at the list of what's at the top and what's at the bottom, in the cities, if you're at the top, then maybe that's good, or maybe cost of living is really high. But if you're in one of these expensive states and not in one of the big cities where that high income is, and you're outside of there, but regionally that's still impacting costs, or people are working remotely, or even if they're commuting in a couple hours, that certainly can drive up the costs in the surrounding area. So that is a curious way to think about this. If you move to one of these states, you go, okay, Massachusetts is number 2 on the list. If I move
Mhm.
there, I'm going to be making more money. I guess maybe not necessarily.
It depends on what part of Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure California and a lot of states have that same issue where the salaries are concentrated, the higher salaries are concentrated near the large cities or in the large cities, and not so much out in the suburban or rural areas that sit a bit farther. So that is an interesting thing to think about. It's also interesting, and maybe more from your perspective, Tony, because you do a lot more real estate than I do. But from a real estate perspective, like a predictive model of looking at, okay, here are the states where there are these really high salaries, but people don't want to live in the epicenter of where those salaries are happening. So, for example, in San Francisco, you might not want to live in San Francisco, but you want to benefit from that salary. So people will move all the way out to like Napa or Santa Rosa, like the Bay, those areas of the Bay, which are farther. Maybe they do hybrid work or fully remote. So then what does that look like from an investor perspective? Does it make sense to invest in property there because people are going to want to live there and commute in? What does that mean from a small business perspective? Is it going to grow the economy because people are now spidering out from the city where they make the money?
Yeah. And I think you can start drawing these circles bigger and bigger around the cities. And while I feel like fully remote obviously like spiked, and then I do feel like it's tapering a little bit and hybrid is becoming more common than fully remote. But if you're hybrid and you're living a couple hours away from Seattle and you have to go to Seattle once a week, twice a week, or every other week, that's a very doable scenario as opposed to driving it every day, which I know some people do make the drive, a couple hour drive every single day. But that is an interesting way to think about it if you're, yeah, thinking about real estate, both if you're buying it to live in it or invest in it, or if you're saying I want to move to a state or I want to take advantage of these high wages, how do I take advantage of that? One that was interesting to me was Hawaii being currently moved from number 7 to number 5. Well, having recently been there, it seems, especially on Maui, but probably on some of the other islands as well, is there really isn't industry to speak of. It's
Mhm.
mainly tourism. So I would expect the wages to be low, even though the cost of living is high. But I hadn't thought about the remote work as much as that instantly popped into your brain, where maybe that is really skewing Hawaii's numbers, right? That during COVID, everybody says, well, if I'm going to work from anywhere, I may as well work from a tropical island. And that
Mhm.
may be skewing those numbers from if you were just to go apply for some random jobs physically in Hawaii, they may not be as high.
Yeah, and I'm looking at this list and trying to draw any conclusions around that same thing. There are also a lot of companies that are moving headquarters or opening new headquarters in other states. So like Reno, Nevada is a place, oh gosh, Walmart took over. I think it's like Bentonville, Arkansas. I think I might be botching that, but so sorry if anyone lives there. The point is that they are creating either moving headquarters or creating these giant hubs, almost building their own cities, right? And then it creates like housing, it creates this local economy. But like you just said, that's also going to skew the numbers for the whole state. Because if you are Arkansas and you work for Walmart, they're going to pay you a lot of money to move out there and work at their hub there because there aren't enough local folks who can work in that corporate environment and maybe have those skills that they can find. So they're going to have to hire externally. And what they do is they usually offer these big salary packages to entice people to move there. So now all of a sudden it's like we built this city within a state, this new little city within a state that's really just like Walmart town. And that's got to skew the entire number for the state because now there's all this money concentrated in this one small area.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe one of our listeners will analyze this and understand it better than maybe you or I will. I'd love to hear feedback because if you look at this, like Florida going from 31 to 27, that's a big jump. Is that remote workers moving there? Is that just, I know there have been a lot of people moving to Florida and maybe it is wealthier people moving. Kansas jumped up a bunch. Like, what's causing that? I can't pull that out of my brain. And in Idaho, I know Boise has become a hot spot, and a lot of the tech people that are fleeing San Francisco have moved to Boise. So maybe that's what's causing some of that. So it is interesting. And then just looking at this list, District of Columbia is number one by actually a fairly significant margin. I guess getting into government must be a good gig, or I don't know if that's just the businesses supporting the government.
Yeah.
Wages seem to be high there, and I wouldn't suspect that a lot of people are moving to DC to work remotely.
No, no, probably not. I think it definitely centers around government. Like you said, it's not necessarily government salaries, but it's all the consultants,
Yeah.
the big consulting firms and things that service the government, the big Boeing contracts, so yeah, it's gotta be more along those lines. And also Maryland's number 4, which makes sense because lots of people who work in
Yeah, yeah. So,
DC
right,
or
so the
service
current the
DC.
2024 list, it goes District of Columbia, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Maryland, Hawaii, California, New Hampshire, Washington, Colorado, Utah is the top 10.
Yep.
And within those, there's a little bit of movement, but no change in the top 4 from 2023 to 2024.
Which makes sense from a New Jersey, New York.
Yeah.
Majority of people live in New Jersey and commute in to Manhattan, so that makes a lot of sense with the wealth concentration or Philly. They live in Jersey and commute into Philly. My old stomping grounds. I did not benefit from that number 3 wealth that I was there, that's for sure. But yeah, there is some interesting things in here. Also, Oregon made a huge jump. Our sister state. What happened
Yeah, where's
there?
Oregon on here? Oh yeah, 20
Number
to
20
17.
to
Yeah, and I don't
17.
know again if that's one big tech company, if that's Nike did a big
Oh,
hiring.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what would drive that, or if it is a desirable place to live. And I know a lot of people have moved out of California for a variety of different reasons, but I think that the fires had a big deal to do with that. And so moving from California up to Oregon, that's not that big of a jump. So what are your take on, like, what do people do with this information?
Yeah, I think it's a tough one because, like we said, we're not exactly sure how the data is playing out. Are we dealing with a lot of remote workers concentrated in an area? Is there a hub opening up from a large company there that's skewing the numbers? I guess just if we zoom all the way out, we can look at 2 people with the same job title in different states are going to feel very differently about how far their paycheck goes. That's just a very simple way to think about it. Even if it's showing that salary figures are technically rising, that doesn't always that can be positive, and it can also just mean cost of living is rising in that area too. So it may just be meeting the moment, and a raise doesn't always translate into feeling wealthier, right? Because it's going to be very dependent on where you live. If you get a raise and you live in New Jersey, that's going to get swallowed right up in your property taxes, and you all know it. It's like sky high property taxes, right? Sky high taxes across the board. But if you get a raise and you live in a lower cost of living area, even though you might be making less than someone who lives in DC or Jersey, that may go farther for you because the cost of living didn't rise in the area that you're in. So, as far as a zoom out, that's the best I can do. How about you, Tony? Because you're much better at this than I am.
I don't know if that's true. You've definitely had, I think, some very different ways of seeing what these numbers mean. And I think that's why I would be curious to hear from any listeners that maybe have a higher knowledge base about this than we do. But for me, one thing that I've always thought about is if you go somewhere or find a job somewhere where you can crank and make really good money, especially, in your younger years, right? You're in your 20s, you can go somewhere, make a bunch of money, live like you're not making a bunch of money, and actually stack some cash. You can then take that to one of these other states that isn't as high up on the list, probably doesn't have as high a cost of living. If you look at the median full-time salary in the District of Columbia is 110 grand or almost. You go down to Mississippi at the bottom, it's $59,000 a year. That's a giant difference. And maybe you don't want to live in Mississippi, maybe you don't want to live in the District of Columbia, but you could probably play with that a little bit. And you could start your life somewhere, your professional life, make money there, and then you could transition to a place that allows more flexibility with that savings and investments and that sort of thing. The other thing to look at this is maybe you want to target, if you're looking for remote work, maybe you want to be looking in some of these specific states and understand that they're going to have likely higher salaries. And then this is showing us one thing. It's not accounting for income taxes or property taxes or all the different things. That doesn't mean that at the end of the day, this is where what you're taking home.
Yeah, that's a good thought. I can think of a couple of friends of mine that do that exact thing. One of my friends lived in the Bay Area in they have these like higher end trailer parks. Like you live in an RV, right? Just where you park your RV. And they're really nice and they have a nice little club amenities and stuff like that. But it's a lot cheaper than a house or renting apartment or anything else you might do in San Francisco. And they worked in San Francisco, so they're making that sky high salary. And they did that for maybe a little shy of 10 years and then just stocked, like you said, lived very inexpensively, stocked up their money, invested their money as well so that they're making the dollars work when they get in the door, and then moved to moved to Idaho. It's a much cheaper place. And they still work, but not at that level where you are working 18-hour days at a big tech company. And then I had another friend who did similar thing where they took a job that was hybrid, flew into the Bay Area from here for 3 days a week and worked on site and then worked home the other two because it's a easy flight out of our little tiny local airport here and cheap flight too, cheaper even than driving. And yeah, and that's how they were able to stock up and live a lifestyle that they wanted. So there are playful ways I think that we could use this data and think about how to bring in some income.
Yeah, I don't know if I actually talked to this person or if I read about it, but it was a nurse that was living somewhere in the Midwest, would fly to the Bay Area, work their 312s, and then fly home. And that was their weekly commute. And they were making bank. And I know that sometimes firefighters will do similar
Mhm.
things to that. And I think that we always talk about having all these different income streams, right? Doing the drip, trickle, flow, flood, and all these. But there is also, you can go make a chunk of money, be really focused, take that money, invest it. That can create income streams for you. And then also then give you the flexibility, maybe in chapter 2 or chapter 3 of your life, to say, no, I'm not going to work those 18 hours a day or do those long commutes. I'm going to diversify my income and even my earned income around things that I like. And I'm able to do that because I have this pile of money that's still growing and kicking off income and those sorts of things. A lot of ways to approach this world, but yeah, I hope that some people reach out with their own analysis on what this data means, and maybe they'll say, "You guys don't know what you're talking about," which is great. That's how we learn too.
Exactly. We're very open to that. So, looking forward to your thoughts. Thanks, everyone, for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review on your favorite podcast platform. And we'll see you next time on Drip Trickle Flow Flood. Thanks, everybody.